I was driving home when the phone rang. It was Dylan. My husband never called around 6 unless he needed something, usually dinner, dry cleaning, or to complain about traffic. But that night, his tone was different. Distant. Flat. "Don't call me for a while," he said. "I need space." I remember the light turning green while my hand stayed frozen on the steering wheel. For a second, I thought I misheard him. "You what?" I asked. "I need space," he repeated. "Time to think. Just stop calling, okay?" There was no noise behind him. No office sounds, no car engine. Just wind. He wasn't at work. I didn't ask where he was. I just looked at my own reflection in the windshield and said, "Perfect. Then don't come home." I hung up before he could respond. That silence after the call was so heavy, it almost had shape. The hum of the car, the faint traffic outside it all, blurred into nothing. I remember pulling into the driveway and sitting there, headlights still on, watching the porch light flicker against the wall like it belonged to someone else's house. Inside, everything looked the same. The dinner I'd prepped that morning was waiting on the counter. Wine glass, single plate, a folded napkin. I poured myself a glass anyway. It wasn't about the food. It was about keeping normalcy from collapsing too fast. Halfway through the drink, I realized I wasn't angry. Not yet. I was something worse, numb. Because when you stop begging for answers, you start preparing for them. I checked my phone again. No messages. No follow-up call. Just that short text from earlier in the day. Working late. Sure, I thought. Late. I put the glass down, turned off the kitchen lights, and walked upstairs. His side of the bed was still made. The pillow didn't even look touched from the night before. I stared at it for a while, the kind of long stare where you're not really looking at the thing, you're looking at everything that led to it. When someone says they need space, what they really mean is someone else is already standing in it. I showered, changed into his old t-shirt, the one from our trip to Arizona years ago, and lay down. The smell of detergent and emptiness filled the room. I thought about calling him back. I even picked up the phone once. But then I saw the lock screen photo us smiling in front of the coast, pretending to still like each other, and I put it down again. He wanted silence. Fine. He could have it. By morning, the house was still. Too still. No coffee brewing, no footsteps on the stairs, no Dylan tossing car keys onto the table. I stood by the kitchen counter, holding a mug of black coffee, watching sunlight crawl through the blinds. It hit me then. Nothing about this was spontaneous. The distance had been building for months, hidden under polite conversations and half-finished dinners. That Thursday night he came home late? He smelled like cologne he never wore for me. The weekend, business trip? He forgot his charger but somehow texted me every morning from a conference that didn't exist on his company calendar. I just hadn't connected the dots. Now I could see the pattern clean, simple, logical. A man rehearsing his exit line before saying it out loud. So I did what I always do when I feel out of control. I organized something. I stripped the sheets, washed them, folded towels, rearranged the fridge. By noon, I had turned chaos into order. The house looked perfect. It was almost funny. The more my marriage fell apart, the cleaner the kitchen got. The phone stayed quiet all day. Around 5, I got a text from my friend Paige. "Dinner tonight?" I typed back, "Maybe another time." I wasn't ready to play normal yet. Instead, I went for a drive. Portland looked calm that evening. Gray clouds, drizzle, that quiet energy the city has when people just want to get home. Except I didn't want to go home. Not to a house that felt borrowed. Not to a silence I didn't create, but somehow had to live in. I parked near the waterfront and watched the reflection of lights ripple on the river. Somewhere between the sound of rain and my own thoughts, something clicked. I didn't need to call him, beg him, or demand answers. I just needed to pay attention. People always show you who they are. You just have to stop talking long enough to see it. That night, I went home and sat on the couch with my laptop, opened our joint account, scrolled through the recent transactions, and bookmarked the page, just in case. No message, no call, nothing. So I turned off my phone, leaned back, and stared at the ceiling. The quiet felt different now, less like punishment, more like information. That's the thing about silence. It tells you everything if you're willing to listen. And I was finally listening. If you've ever been in that kind of silence, the kind that answers every question you were too afraid to ask, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you like stories about cheating, revenge, and quiet strength, make sure you subscribe for more. Now, let's continue. I poured another glass of wine and set it beside his plate, even though I knew he wasn't coming. The chicken was already cold, the kind of cold that kills any appetite. I sat down anyway. Old habits die slowly, especially the ones built around waiting for someone who stopped showing up long before he said the words out loud. The clock on the wall ticked louder than it should have. It was almost 8. Dylan used to come through the door at 7:30 sharp, loosen his tie, kiss my forehead, and say, "Smells good, babe." It had been weeks since that tone sounded real. I picked up my fork, pushed food around, and stared at the chair across from me. That stupid chair, same one I'd bought on sale because he liked clean design. Funny how a chair can feel arrogant when it's empty. The house creaked a little when the heater kicked in. Outside, the neighborhood lights flickered on, one by one, like a line of people pretending everything in their lives was perfectly fine. My phone stayed silent on the table. No call, no text, no apology. Just a screen that reflected my own face back at me. I opened my email. A new message from him. Short. Cold. Working late. Don't wait up. That was it. No name. No punctuation beyond the period. I closed the laptop and laughed once. Not the kind of laugh that feels good. The kind that keeps you from throwing the glass. Half the chicken went into the trash. I rinsed the plate, wiped the counter, and stood there, hands resting on the sink. The reflection in the window looked like someone I used to know. Same face, different eyes. I used to think marriages ended with shouting, with slammed doors or torn-up letters. But sometimes they end with a perfectly normal dinner, just missing one person. The air felt heavier by the minute. I opened the back door for a breath of cold night, the smell of wet pavement sneaking in. Somewhere a dog barked. I took a sip straight from the bottle and felt the sharp burn slide down my throat. Dylan was somewhere out there, probably checking his phone, smiling at a message that wasn't from me. I didn't need to know where. I just needed to remember this moment, the quiet that follows betrayal before the proof even arrives. The fridge hummed. The streetlight outside flickered through the curtains. My wedding photo still hung on the wall near the stairs. I walked over and stared at it. We were both younger there, smiling like we believed life was simple. I touched the edge of the frame and whispered, "You lied first." I left the light on in the hallway when I went upstairs. Not for him, for me. The kind of soft light that makes an empty house look less empty. I pulled back the sheets on my side of the bed and slid in. The pillow was cool, untouched. I turned on my side, facing the spot where he should have been, and waited for sleep that didn't come. The next morning, I woke up earlier than usual. The house was too quiet, the kind of quiet that feels staged. I made coffee, the automatic way 2 scoops, a touch of cinnamon, the mug with the chip on the rim. His mug stayed in the cabinet. The smell filled the kitchen, familiar but hollow. I sat at the table, scrolling through the news without seeing any of it. At 8:10, the garage door stayed closed. At 8:15, I stopped checking. He wasn't coming back, not today. There's something strange about routine. It keeps running even when the person it's built around disappears. My body still reached for the second mug, still turned toward the door at the sound of a car outside, still waited. By noon, I gave up pretending to work. I cleaned instead, laundry, windows, cabinets, all spotless. Control disguised as order. I folded his clothes that had been sitting in the dryer and placed them neatly on the bed. For a second, I almost laughed. Here I was, folding shirts for a man who hadn't earned clean laundry in months. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the stack. That's when I noticed the faint smell his cologne, barely there, mixed with something unfamiliar. Sweet, floral, not mine. I froze. My first instinct was denial. Maybe he brushed past someone. Maybe it lingered from the office. But deep down, I knew. These things don't happen by accident. I picked up my phone, opened his contact, Hovered over call, and stopped. If I called, he'd lie. If I confronted, he'd spin it. Men like Dylan always think they can talk their way out of consequence. So I did nothing. I set the phone down, opened the window, and let the cold air wash through the room. Standing there, I realized something. Doing nothing was a form of power too. Silence can be strategy if you let it breathe long enough. The day passed in a strange rhythm. I answered work emails, sorted receipts, even paid the water bill. Everything ordinary, except for the steady pulse of awareness running underneath, the kind that whispers, "He's already gone." That evening, I poured another glass of wine and sat back at the same table. One glass, one plate, the same chair across from me still empty. But this time, it didn't feel like waiting. It felt like preparation. The first sign of peace, I've learned, is when your anger finally gets bored. I leaned back, eyes fixed on the soft light above the table. The quiet wasn't so heavy anymore. It was shifting, turning into something I could work with. The sound of my phone buzzing broke the stillness. A message preview flashed across the screen, just one sentence from a familiar name. And that's when everything started to move again. The message came from the bank. Unusual activity detected on your joint account. Please review recent transactions. End of quote. For a moment, I thought it was some random fraud alert. Then I saw the amount, $742.16, and the merchant name, Half Moon Bay Resort, California. My coffee went cold before I even blinked. Dylan had told me last week he was flying down to San Diego for a supplier meeting. Half Moon Bay was 300 miles in the opposite direction. I clicked View Details. Another charge appeared. Ocean View Lounge, Half Moon Bay. Same day, 2 hours apart. He wasn't at a conference. He was at the coast. I sat there staring at the numbers, the date, the timestamp. Every line on that statement looked like a sentence in a story I hadn't been told. For a second, I thought about calling him. Then I remembered his voice from that night. "Don't call me. I need space." Fine. He could have all the space he wanted. I'd just fill mine with facts. I opened my work email and typed one line to my friend at the bank. "Paige, can you confirm the merchant location for this transaction?" She replied 10 minutes later. "Yep, it's a coastal resort, north of Monterey. Checked in guest name, Dylan Turner. Guest added a secondary name for amenities, Harper Linwood." Harper. That name hit like static. I knew her, his assistant, the one who always overlaughed at his jokes during company events. The one who called him D, like they'd known each other for years. My fingers tightened around the phone. I didn't drop it, didn't curse, just breathed. That's what control feels like, choosing your reaction. Paige called right after sending the email. "Cam, I'm so sorry, I shouldn't have told you, but It's fine," I said, cutting her off gently. "You didn't tell me anything. I didn't already know." It was a lie, but one that felt strangely calm to say. After hanging up, I opened Dylan's Instagram. Nothing. Still locked down since the day I joked about how private he'd become. Harper's profile wasn't private, though. A quick search, and there it was, a photo from 2 nights ago. Ocean waves, sunset, and a caption, "Some weekends feel like freedom." Freedom. I almost laughed. In the reflection of the screen, I caught my own face. Not sad, not broken, just awake. The kind of awake that only comes after denial finally stops doing its job. I spent the next hour digging. Flight confirmations in his email. He still hadn't changed the shared laptop password. Hotel receipts in his work trips folder. Credit card payments scheduled automatically. The trail wasn't hidden. He just assumed I'd never look. When I closed the laptop, the living room looked different. The same furniture, same color, but the air had changed, colder, clearer. I picked up my phone again, hovered over his contact, and instead of calling, I texted, "Everything okay at the conference?" No answer. An hour later, I got a response. "Busy day. We'll call later." I smiled. Not because of what he said, but because of what I now knew, that he still thought I was blind. The next morning, I went to work as usual. My team talked about deadlines and new clients. I nodded at the right times, smiled when needed. Inside, I was running numbers not for a project, but for my life. I made a list. Check all joint accounts. Freeze the shared credit card. Find a good attorney who doesn't play golf with him. Wait. Watch. Collect everything. That's the part people never tell you about betrayal, the quiet math that follows it. Every dollar, every minute, every word becomes evidence. At lunch, Paige texted again. Cam, are you okay? I typed back. I'm organized. That was all she needed to know. By the time I drove home, my brain had already sorted through years of small details I'd ignored. The late nights, the random hotel soaps in his suitcase, the way he'd started calling me by my first name instead of babe. It was all there, a slow fade disguised as routine. I parked in the driveway and sat there with the engine still running. My phone buzzed again. A message from Dylan. Long day. Going to crash early. I typed a reply, but deleted it before sending. There was no point. Every response just gave him another opening to twist the narrative. So I said nothing. Inside, the house looked untouched, almost staged. His jacket still hung on the chair. The mail sat unopened on the counter. I went straight to the dining room, opened my laptop, and printed the receipts. One by one. The paper came out warm from the printer, like it still held a pulse. I stacked them neatly in a folder labeled Household Records. That's the thing about evidence. You don't hide it, you organize it. I made tea, sat by the window, and watched the rain hit the driveway. Each drop hit the pavement like punctuation. Somewhere out there, Dylan was probably laughing at something Harper said. Maybe she was wearing one of those perfumes that smelled expensive but shallow. Let him have his space. I was building mine too, just quieter, sharper, and entirely legal. By the time the clock hit 10, I'd already drafted an email to a name I remembered from a coworker's divorce story. Jonas Reed, attorney at law. Subject line: consultation request. Body: I'd like to discuss a potential separation. I'm not sure if I need legal representation yet, but I want to understand my options. Camille Turner. I didn't hesitate before pressing send. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. The house was still, the air cool. I made coffee and looked at the folder on the table. It wasn't heavy, but it held everything that mattered: proof, clarity, leverage. I took a slow sip and said out loud, "Let's see what space really costs." How's it? The cup clinked softly against the counter. The sound stayed in the room like an agreement. Nothing about this felt like revenge yet. It felt like preparation dressed as calm. The coffee shop smelled like roasted beans and rain-soaked coats. I spotted him right away, Jonas Reed, the lawyer whose name had been sitting in my inbox since last night. Mid-40s, tidy beard, brown blazer, the kind of man who read contracts like bedtime stories. He stood when I walked in. "Camille Turner," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "Let's get you something warm before we talk business." I ordered a black coffee. No cream, no sugar. I didn't need comfort. I needed clarity. He opened a folder the moment we sat down. "So, you said you wanted to understand your options. That usually means someone's been lying, spending, or sleeping where they shouldn't." I met his eyes. "All three." Jonas didn't flinch. He just nodded once. "Oregon, right? You're in a community property state. That means anything earned or bought during the marriage is split 50-50 unless you've got a prenup. You do?" "No," I said. "We thought trust was enough." He smiled faintly, like he'd heard that line 100 times. "Trust is nice. Lawyers prefer paper." He slid a notepad toward me. "Let's start here. I need timelines, assets, and any evidence you have." I pulled out the manila folder from my bag and placed it between us. Receipts, flight confirmations, bank statements, everything I'd printed the night before. The air between us changed when he opened it. No drama, no shock. Just silent confirmation that my instincts had been right. He flipped through each page slowly. "Half Moon Bay Resort," he said. "Interesting choice. You'd be surprised how many affairs happen there. People think the ocean forgives bad decisions." I almost smiled. "Does it?" "Not legally," he said, and scribbled a note. He leaned back. "Let me ask you something. Do you want revenge, or do you want out?" I stirred my coffee, thinking, is there a difference? "Oh, sure," he said. Revenge feels good for about a week. Freedom lasts a lifetime, but sometimes they overlap. I liked that answer. It sounded like he'd seen women like me before, calm, controlled, already past crying. What happens next? I asked. For now, nothing loud, he said. Keep your routine. Don't move money that looks suspicious. Don't confront him. Let him stay confident. Men like this always underestimate quiet women. I raised an eyebrow. And if he's already moved money? Then we trace it. Quietly. You'll be surprised how traceable arrogance is. He explained things in a rhythm that made betrayal sound: procedural joint accounts, disclosure requirements, asset freezes. Each word was another small piece of control, sliding back into my hands. Then he said, "Find yourself a private investigator, licensed in California, since that's where the affair happened. Get proof we can use if it goes to court." Any recommendations? I asked. He smiled again, faintly this time. I know a guy, discreet, fast, and allergic to drama. His name's Marcus Hale. I'll text you his number. I wrote it down. The name felt solid, real, like the next chess move already existed. When the coffee arrived, steam curled between us. Jonas leaned forward. Camille, here's the real trick. Don't make this emotional. The second you act angry, he wins. You need to make him think you're fine, better, even. That's when people slip. You can't control what he does, but you can control what he believes. I nodded slowly. That made sense. I'd been doing that for years, pretending calm in rooms full of cracks. Now it was just strategy. He finished his coffee and said, Stay quiet until you're ready. Call me when you have the investigator's report. We'll take it from there. Oh, gah. We stood, shook hands again. His grip was steady. I liked that. Solid men don't waste words. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glossy and clean. I walked back to my car and sat for a minute, the city moving in slow motion around me. I looked at my reflection in the window. Same woman, different posture. There's a strange kind of peace that comes from knowing the worst thing has already happened. The rest is just math. I turned on the engine and let the heater hum. My phone buzzed. Jonas had sent a text. Marcus Hale, licensed PI. Works fast. Don't tell your husband you're hiring him. Underneath was the contact number. I saved it, then opened Dylan's last message again. Long day, going to crash early. My thumb hovered over the screen. I typed 2 words and deleted them. Then I typed again. Hope you're resting. And sent it. He'd read it as softness. He'd think I was forgiving, still in denial, still waiting. Good. Let him believe that. The next few days passed, like I was living inside a soundproof box. Work, errands, coffee runs, all autopilot. But underneath that stillness, everything was shifting. At night, I lay awake listening to the faint buzz of my phone, wondering if he'd text again. He didn't. He was probably too busy playing pretend somewhere by the ocean. On Thursday, the email came. Short, professional, from Marcus Hale Investigations. Mrs. Turner, I received your referral from Mr. Reed. Please confirm if you'd like to proceed with surveillance and provide travel details of your husband. Retainer fee attached. I read it twice, took a slow breath, and typed my reply. Proceed. Attached are his travel dates, work itinerary, and a photo. Please keep this confidential. When I clicked send, something inside me steadied. It wasn't relief, and it wasn't anger. It was structure finally, a plan that made sense. I poured another cup of coffee and sat by the window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. Somewhere out there, my husband was pretending to find himself. I was just starting to find my way back too, one document, one name, one quiet move at a time. The sound of rain returned the next morning, soft against the kitchen windows. I opened my laptop and saw the new email sitting in my inbox. Subject: Confirmation. Surveillance initiated. Marcus Hale didn't waste time. He'd attached a short note. Client file created. Initial report within 72 hours. We operate quietly. Good. That was exactly what I needed, quiet. I read it twice, closed the laptop, and went about my morning. Toast, black coffee, The same routine I'd had before my marriage turned into a crime scene without witnesses. At 9, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I answered. Mrs. Turner? The voice was calm, deep, efficient. Marcus Hale? Just wanted to confirm a few details before I begin. I leaned against the counter. Go ahead. Your husband, Dylan Turner, age 41, senior engineer at Northcrest, traveling frequently between Portland and California? Yes, he continued, no hesitation. You believe he's involved with a woman named Harper Linwood? I don't need belief, I said. I need proof. There was a brief pause. Understood. He asked a few more practical questions: car model, favorite hotels, the brand of cologne Dylan wore. Marcus didn't ask about emotions, only logistics. I appreciated that. Feelings wouldn't help. Facts would. I'll be in touch by Sunday, he said. I don't text. I call. Safer that way. When the call ended, I exhaled slowly. It felt strange having an ally who didn't care about the drama, only the data. I cleaned the kitchen again, even though it was spotless. People think control looks loud. It doesn't. It looks like wiping a counter that's already clean because the silence needs something to do. By Friday afternoon, I was halfway through a client presentation when my phone lit up. Marcus Hale calling. I muted my coworker's chatter and stepped into the hallway. His voice was the same steady rhythm. We have movement. My heart didn't race. It slowed. He continued. Your husband checked into the Half Moon Bay Resort last night. Same reservation style as before. The woman joined him around 8. My throat felt dry. You're sure it's her? She used her own name at the front desk, paid for the spa with her own card. They didn't even try to hide it. Typical. People who cheat always assume the one they're betraying is too soft to notice. Marcus went on. I've taken photos. Dinner, bar, the hotel entrance. I'll send the file securely by the weekend. Would you like video evidence as well? Yes, I said. My voice was quiet but sharp. I want everything documented. He hesitated for half a beat. You're very composed, Mrs. Turner. I've been training for this, I said, and hung up. The rest of the day blurred into gray. Meetings, polite smiles, nods that meant nothing. Every sound felt distant, like my life had already moved somewhere else, and I was just finishing the last shift before leaving. That evening, I went home, poured a drink, and sat at the dining table where the ghost of our marriage still lived. I thought about how many times I'd defended him to friends, how many excuses I'd made. He's tired. He's stressed. He's just quiet. All of it sounded ridiculous now. By Sunday morning, the report arrived. A plain brown envelope on my doorstep, sealed, no return address. I brought it inside, locked the door, and placed it on the kitchen island. For a full minute, I just stared at it. Funny how truth weighs almost nothing but still feels heavy. I sliced it open with a butter knife and pulled out the contents: 10 photographs, a small flash drive, a one-page report. The photos were clear. Dylan and Harper on a balcony, drinks in hand, her leaning into him, his hand at her waist. Another of them walking to a car, his jacket over her shoulders. The last one stopped me. It was a shot from behind Dylan, kissing her outside the hotel elevator. There was a timestamp at the corner. 8:43 p.m. Same hour he'd texted me last week. Working late. Don't wait up. I didn't cry. Not even close. The body runs out of tears long before the mind runs out of proof. I plugged the flash drive into my laptop. The video played without sound. Marcus must have recorded from a distance. The image shook slightly as the couple walked hand in hand along the beach. Her white dress blew in the wind. Dylan smiled like the man I hadn't seen in years. The camera zoomed in just before they kissed again. Then the screen went black. I shut the laptop and sat still. It wasn't anger that came next. It was arithmetic. Every lie, every night alone, every business trip now had a number attached to it. Proof turns betrayal into something measurable, almost manageable. I took a long breath and whispered to myself, he's not smarter, he's just sloppy. And after a few minutes, I gathered everything: photos, report, drive, and placed them neatly in the same folder as the receipts. The label now read Evidence. Then I called Jonas. He answered on the second ring. Read. It's Camille, I said. I have what you need. He didn't sound surprised. Marcus moves fast. Did he get clean shots? Crystal clear. Good, he said. Send me copies. Keep the originals. We'll start drafting next week. You'll be the calmest client I've had all year. Hidmadir. I'm not calm, I said quietly. I'm focused. Same thing, he replied. When the call ended, I poured myself another glass of wine. Outside, the sky was heavy and blue, the kind that holds back rain but doesn't break. I stood at the window, watching my reflection fade against the glass as night fell. I didn't feel victorious or broken, just aware. Awareness is dangerous. Once you have it, you can't go back to pretending. The phone vibrated on the counter, a new message from Dylan. Back in town. Miss you. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Then I turned the phone face down, took a sip of wine, and whispered, Not anymore. The glass caught the dim kitchen light, reflecting just enough to show a woman who had stopped waiting. I woke up before dawn, not because I couldn't sleep, but because my brain had already started sorting through numbers. My marriage was ending in spreadsheets now. The first thing I did was open the laptop and pull up the joint bank account. Every transaction told a story. Mortgage, utilities, grocery runs, dinners for two that were really for one. And then there were the new ones. Unfamiliar restaurants, hotel stays, expensive wine. He was building his second life with my income attached. I opened a blank Excel sheet and started cataloging everything. Dates, amounts, notes. My version of therapy came in formulas and columns. By 7, the file looked like something an auditor would frame. Clean, color-coded, every dollar accounted for. That was the thing about control. It wasn't about power, it was about order. When the world spins, you make lists. I emailed Jonas the summary and added a note. You'll find the relevant expenses under the tab labeled Personal Recreation. He replied within minutes. Perfect, keep tracking, don't move anything yet. I'm sending over a preliminary separation draft. We'll keep this quiet until we're ready. I poured a cup of coffee, the kind that's too bitter but keeps your thoughts straight. The printer hummed while I scrolled through the draft Jonas had sent. Legal language turned betrayal into paperwork. Petitioner, respondent, asset division, disclosure of property. The house was still. No footsteps, no doors slamming, no Dylan tossing his keys on the counter. I almost forgot how peaceful silence could sound when it belonged to me. At noon, Jonas called. Camille, quick update. I spoke with Marcus. The photos and report will go in the file as Exhibit A. You're sitting in a very strong position, but don't show your hand yet. I swiveled in my chair, watching sunlight creep across the living room floor. Not a problem, I said. He still thinks I'm clueless. That's the best leverage you'll ever have, he said. After hanging up, I walked through the house, mentally stripping it of meaning. The wedding photos, the framed vacation shots, the stupid ceramic bowl he insisted on buying in Palm Springs. All of it looked staged now, like props from a play that had already closed. I started packing his things not out of rage, but precision. Shirts folded, ties rolled, shoes wrapped in newspaper, each box labeled in neat handwriting, office, closet, miscellaneous regrets. By 3, I'd filled 6 boxes. I stacked them neatly by the hallway. The air smelled faintly of dust and lavender detergent. It was amazing how light the house felt when half of it was gone. I went back to the laptop and opened another document, this one, titled Personal Financial Transition Plan. It wasn't dramatic, just a list of clean exits, close shared credit lines, move direct deposits to my personal account, change beneficiary designations, update passwords, contact assurance agent. It was the kind of plan that looked professional on paper but ruthless in practice. Around 5, I got a call from Dylan. First one in days. Hey, he said, his voice soft, cautious. You've been quiet. I've been busy, I replied. Busy with what? Just work, I said, keeping my tone even. He chuckled, that fake casual tone men use when they're nervous. Guess we both needed the space after all. Looks like it, I said. There was a pause, then he added. You sound different. Do I? Yeah, he said. Calmer. I smiled faintly, though he couldn't see it. Maybe I finally listened to you. He laughed, relieved, thinking I was playing along. That's good, babe. We'll talk soon, okay? Sure, I said. Talk soon. When the call ended, I stared at the phone for a long second. It was strange how easy lying becomes once the truth has stopped hurting. The next day, I met Jonas downtown to sign a few preliminary papers. The office smelled like fresh toner and polished wood. He slid a manila folder across the table. This draft keeps everything neutral. We're filing under irreconcilable differences, but once he's served, we can amend for cause if needed. You'll have the upper hand either way. I scanned the first few pages. What about the house? It's community property, so we'll make sure your contributions are documented. With his affair on record, we can push for majority equity. I nodded. And his accounts? Tracked, he said. But we'll need him to make the next mistake. Trust me, he will. I signed where he pointed. My handwriting looked steady, even graceful. I didn't feel powerful, but I felt precise, and that was better. When I left the building, the city felt sharper. Air cooler, sounds clearer. It wasn't happiness. It was clarity, and clarity can almost feel like joy if you're tired enough. At home, I opened the closet one more time. A few of his jackets still hung there. I touched the fabric, expensive, tailored, smug, and then let go. I didn't hate him. I just couldn't respect someone who mistook kindness for weakness. That evening, I sat at the kitchen table with a stack of documents, Jonas's draft, and my coffee gone cold. The folder labeled Evidence rested beside them like a quiet ally. I flipped through the pages again, making small notes, adjusting margins, tightening details. Every word on those papers was deliberate. Somewhere in the middle of all that, I realized I wasn't preparing for revenge anymore. I was preparing for freedom. And the difference between the two, I decided, was paperwork. The front door creaked just after midnight. I didn't move. I'd been sitting on the couch, lights low, laptop still open but untouched. Dylan's footsteps echoed across the hardwood floor, slow, careful, almost guilty. He stopped in the hallway when he saw the boxes. They were stacked neatly by the wall, each labeled with his name in black marker. He didn't speak right away, just stared. "What's this?" he asked finally. I didn't look up. Organization. He dropped his bag near the door. "You're serious?" I sipped the last of my coffee. "You said you needed space. I made some." He stood there, eyes darting between the boxes and me, trying to figure out if this was a test. Men like Dylan never know when a line has already been crossed. "Camille, come on," he said, voice softening. "Don't do this. I just needed a little time to clear my head." "Half Moon Bay?" I asked. He blinked. "What?" "You were there, with Harper." Color drained from his face, that particular shade of shock reserved for liars who realize the evidence isn't theoretical anymore. "Who told you that?" "Receipts. Bank records. Photos. Take your pick." He swallowed hard. "Jesus, you hired someone?" "I verified what I was already living through," I said calmly. "That's not paranoia, that's accounting." He stepped closer. "It's not what you think." "Then explain it," I said, still seated. "Because I'm very good with numbers, Dylan, but I can't seem to find the version of this equation where you don't end up being a cheating asshole." He flinched. "You're being cruel." "I'm being accurate." "Are." The silence that followed was long enough for the refrigerator to hum back to life. He rubbed the back of his neck, the way he always did when cornered. "I messed up, okay? I wasn't happy. We haven't been close." I raised an eyebrow. "So your solution was geography and another woman?" "I thought I needed space." "And you got it," I said. "Legally, permanently, and with your own signature waiting on the counter." And priest. He looked toward the kitchen, where a single envelope sat under the lamplight. "What is that?" "Separation draft," I said. "Jonas Reed, attorney. You'll like him, he's efficient." He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. "You can't be serious. You're just going to end it? Like this?" I stood, slow and deliberate. "No, Dylan. You ended it. I'm just filing the paperwork." He followed me into the kitchen, words tumbling now. "Camille, wait, listen. I can fix this. I'll end it with her, Don't, I said sharply. Don't promise to end something you chose to start. He stopped talking. I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. You know what the funniest part is? You thought I'd fall apart, that I'd scream, throw things, beg you to explain. You mistook quiet for weakness. You always did. He shook his head. That's not fair. Neither is betrayal, I said. He looked at the boxes again, like they might rearrange themselves into forgiveness. So that's it? You're just done? No, I said. I'm finished. That's different. He tried one more time. Camille, please. We can go to counseling. I laughed softly. You think a therapist can invoice us back into trust? He didn't answer. The silence between us stretched until even the air felt heavy. Finally, I picked up the envelope and handed it to him. You'll find your name on page 3. Try not to spill anything on it. He took it, but his hands trembled. You don't mean this. And I've never meant anything more, I said. He exhaled, the kind of long, defeated sigh that sounds like a door closing. You've changed. No, I said. I just stopped apologizing for noticing. He turned toward the door, then stopped. So what now? You just erase me? Not erase, I said. Archive. He left without another word. The door clicked shut, clean and final. I stood there for a long while, the house echoing with the absence of his voice. It wasn't triumph. I felt it was stillness. The kind of stillness that comes after a storm when you finally understand what silence is supposed to sound like. I walked over to the boxes and touched the top one lightly. His name looked so ordinary in marker, almost harmless. I sat on the couch again, phone in hand, and typed a message to Jonas. He's been served. Proceed. Then I turned off my phone, exhaled slowly, and stared at the ceiling. There was no anger left to manage. No fear to hide. Just the unmistakable calm of someone who had chosen her own ending and meant it. The house didn't feel empty anymore. It felt correctly sized. 2 weeks passed before his name showed up again, this time in an email from his company's HR department. The subject line read, Notice of Internal Review, Conduct Policy. End of. I wasn't supposed to see it, but my friend Paige, who handled payroll for several firms in Portland, had forwarded it quietly with one sentence attached. You didn't hear this from me. I opened the file and read. Northcrest Engineering had launched a formal review into inappropriate workplace relationships affecting project integrity. They didn't say Dylan's name outright, but they didn't have to. The words senior staff member and junior assistant were enough. I stared at the screen for a long moment, then closed the laptop and went to pour myself a cup of coffee. I didn't smile, and I didn't gloat. Justice isn't loud, it's methodical. The day went on like any other. I answered client calls, finished a report, even bought groceries. But underneath all of it was that low, steady hum of satisfaction, the kind that doesn't come from revenge, but from confirmation that reality eventually catches up. That evening, I was making dinner when headlights flashed across the window. The sound of tires on gravel, a car door, then footsteps. He still had a key, though not for long. The door opened and Dylan walked in. He looked smaller somehow. The confidence he always wore like armor was gone. Camille, he said quietly. I didn't turn around. You're trespassing. He hesitated. You changed the locks? After you moved out, yes, I said, setting down the knife I was using to chop vegetables. The spare you're holding is outdated. He took a deep breath, exhaled slow. I just need to talk. I doubt that. He stepped closer. Please. 5 minutes. I finally turned to face him. He looked tired, unshaven, and the man standing in front of me wasn't the one who used to walk through this door like he owned the air. Fine, I said. 5 minutes. Start the clock. He swallowed hard. You ruined me. I tilted my head slightly. Pretty sure you handled that yourself. Northcrest suspended me, he said. They're saying I violated ethics policy, that I compromised client data. They're investigating everything. I'm sure they are. You reported me, didn't you? I looked at him evenly. I didn't have to. Your behavior reported itself. His jaw clenched. You think this is funny? You wanted to destroy me. No, I said, voice calm. I wanted to protect myself. The destruction was a side effect. A Bruden. He looked around the room, like he was trying to remember what home used to feel like. They're talking about termination. Harper's gone. She resigned yesterday. She won't even answer my calls. Imagine that, I said, turning back to the cutting board. Consequences. What a concept. He took a step closer. I loved you, Camille. Past tense noted. His shoulders slumped. What happened to you? You used to care. I still do, I said, not looking up. Just not about you. He went quiet. I could hear his breathing, unsteady, uneven. You'll regret this, he said finally. Unlikely, I replied. I document everything. That must have hit something because he flinched like I'd slapped him. So that's it? You just erased 9 years? No, I said softly. I archived them. They're filed under lesson learned. He stood there for a few more seconds, waiting for some sign of mercy. There wasn't one. Then he muttered something under his breath, turned, and walked out. I watched through the window as his car backed down the driveway. For a brief moment, I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity is just another form of attachment, and I was done carrying his weight. I finished dinner, plated it for one, and ate in silence. It tasted better that way. Later that night, I checked my email again. A new message from Jonas. Subject: Progress. Body: Internal review confirmed. Northcrest HR contacted me for verification of documents. No response required yet. Everything's moving exactly as expected. Exactly as expected. I shut the laptop and looked around the room. The same space that once felt suffocating now felt deliberate, like every wall and chair had been placed there for a reason. Around midnight, I went outside to take out the trash. The air was crisp, cold enough to bite a little. Across the street, porch lights flickered on in the neighbors' houses. Everyone else was asleep in their quiet routines, unaware that one of them had just dismantled a marriage with spreadsheets and patience. I stood there for a while, breathing in the cold, the smell of pine, wet pavement, and freedom. When I went back inside, the phone buzzed again. A text from Dylan. You win, I typed back. It wasn't a competition. Then I set the phone face down and went to bed. The next morning, I woke early, sunlight bleeding through the curtains. The world outside looked unchanged, but inside, something had shifted. My coffee tasted stronger. My steps felt lighter. Justice doesn't arrive with noise. It walks in quietly, finds its place at your table, and stays there. By noon, I'd already called the locksmith again, just to be sure. The new keys jingled in my hand, small and metallic and final. The email came in on a Tuesday morning, subject line: Settlement discussion, urgent. Jonas called 5 minutes later. He's panicking, he said without preamble. His attorney just reached out. They want to talk settlement before the formal filing hits court. I set my coffee down. Already? Apparently, Northcrest is finalizing his termination package, Jonas said. He's trying to protect whatever he's got left before the HR report becomes public record. You ready to play this smart? I've been doing that since the first lie, I said. Jonas laughed softly. Good answer. Here's the thing, he's offering a 50-50 split. No contest, no media, full confidentiality clause. I raised an eyebrow even though he couldn't see it. He wants to buy my silence. Pretty much. I told his lawyer we'd consider it, but you and I both know we won't. I leaned back in my chair. Let's make him think we might. Jonas chuckled again, that satisfied lawyer tone. Now you're speaking my language. We scheduled a meeting for Thursday morning at Jonas's office. The next few days moved quietly, almost too quietly, like the house was holding its breath. When Thursday came, I arrived early. Jonas's conference room was all glass and steel, the kind of place that made arrogance shrink. He handed me a coffee and said, Remember, don't interrupt him. Don't react, and if he gets emotional, let him. Every word he says is leverage. Oh! Dylan walked in 5 minutes later, accompanied by his lawyer, a thin man in a gray suit who looked like he billed people for breathing. Dylan looked different, no tie, no charm, just exhaustion dressed as composure. He sat down across from me, eyes scanning my face for softness that wasn't there. Camille, he started, voice low, rehearsed. I want to settle this like adults. I nodded politely. Then, act like one. His lawyer cleared his throat. Mr. Turner understands mistakes were made and wishes to resolve this privately to avoid unnecessary exposure. Exposure, Jonas repeated, leaning forward slightly. That's one word for it. The lawyer ignored the jab. We propose an equal division of assets and no further legal action. Both parties will sign a non-disclosure agreement to protect reputations. I glanced at Jonas, who gave the smallest nod. I folded my hands and looked straight at Dylan. You're offering me half of what I already built? He shifted in his seat. We built it together. That's generous, I said evenly, considering I was the one managing the mortgage, the taxes, and your mess. Jonas spoke before Dylan could answer. Camille isn't interested in half. She's interested in fair. And given the financial misconduct and adultery, fair looks closer to 70-30. Dylan's lawyer frowned. That's unreasonable. How? What's unreasonable? Jonas said calmly. Is your client using joint funds to finance hotel stays with his subordinate while calling it business travel? We have documentation. The room went silent, except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Dylan's jaw tightened, and he turned to me. You really want to drag this out? You'll ruin us both. No, I said. You did that the day you confused my patients for blindness. His lawyer leaned in, whispering something. Dylan nodded, exhaled, and said, 60-40, final offer. Jonas smiled without warmth. Final offers are only final when both parties agree. We don't. I added quietly. We'll let the court decide. They're good with math. We stood to leave. Dylan looked like a man who'd just realized charm was no longer currency. As I reached for my bag, he said, You've changed, Camille. I paused at the doorway. No. I just stopped discounting myself. Back in Jonas's office, he shut the door and said, That was artful. He's losing control, and he knows it. We'll draft a counterclaim tomorrow. I nodded, though the adrenaline still hummed beneath my calm. He thought I'd settle for peace. Jonas gave me a knowing look. Peace doesn't come cheap. That afternoon, I went home and sat at my desk. I opened the folder where everything was kept: photos, receipts, legal drafts, and placed the meeting notes inside. The file had grown thick, heavy, but it wasn't the weight of pain anymore. It was the weight of proof. Outside, the sky was dimming, soft gray light spilling through the blinds. I made tea, opened my laptop, and looked at the financial spreadsheet one last time. Every number now had meaning. Every cent was accounted for. My phone buzzed again. Jonas. Just got confirmation. Northcrest officially terminated him today. No severance. I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back. Understood. No emojis. No exclamation marks. Just closure in its cleanest form. I poured my tea, sat on the couch, and looked at the half-empty shelves where his things used to be. The house felt honest, now quiet but not hollow. There's a point where revenge stops being about them and starts being about symmetry. I wasn't trying to hurt him anymore. I was just restoring balance. When the clock hit 9, I grabbed a pen and crossed one final line off the list on my desk. Negotiate leverage. Done. I leaned back in the chair, staring out the window at the streetlights flickering to life. Somewhere out there, Dylan was probably sitting in his car, realizing that every lie has a receipt and I'd saved them all. I took another sip of tea and whispered to no one. Perfect. The story broke on a quiet Monday morning. I didn't have to look for it. It found me. My phone lit up with a text from Paige. Turn on channel off and, right now. I did. The headline across the screen read, Northcrest Engineering faces ethics scandal. Senior engineer under investigation for workplace misconduct. The anchor's voice was measured, the way news anchors always sound when they're pretending to be impartial. Sources confirm the employee in question has been identified as Dylan Turner, a lead structural engineer with the firm. The company declined to comment, citing an ongoing internal investigation. I sat there at my kitchen counter, mug in hand, watching my husband's face flash across the screen in a photo taken from some company event 2 years ago. Smiling, proud, confident, The irony was almost cinematic. They didn't mention Harper by name, but the subtext was there. Inappropriate conduct with a subordinate. The kind of phrase that sounds sterile until you realize it's describing your marriage imploding in public. The phone rang a few minutes later, Jonas. You seeing the news? I am, I said, voice steady. Then you also know this is better than any courtroom statement. We stay quiet. No public response, no interviews, nothing. Understood. He hesitated. You doing okay? I smiled faintly. Silence has always been my best language. Oh? After hanging up, I went to the living room and turned the TV off. The sudden quiet filled the space again, thick and calm. An hour later, I opened my email. There were messages from coworkers, distant acquaintances, even one from an old friend who wrote, "Saw the news, you always deserved better." I didn't reply to any of them. Instead, I wrote a short note to my clients. Dear all, due to unforeseen personal matters, I'll be working remotely for a few weeks. Thank you for your understanding. Then I closed my laptop, grabbed my coat, and stepped outside. The Portland air was cool, damp with early rain. Leaves stuck to the pavement like forgotten thoughts. At the cafe down the street, the barista recognized me. Hey Camille, you're on your own today? Always, I said, smiling. I sat by the window, sipping my cappuccino, watching people rush to work, oblivious to the fact that a man's career and the remnants of my marriage were unraveling in real time just a few miles away. For the first time in months, I felt something like peace. Not the fragile kind that needs approval, but the grounded kind that comes after you've survived enough noise to appreciate quiet. Around noon, Dylan called. His name flashed on the screen like an echo from a life that had expired. I let it ring until it went silent. A few seconds later, a voicemail. Camille, I need to talk. Please, you can't just sit there and let this happen. I lost my job. Everything's gone. Harper's gone. I don't even know where to start. I deleted it without listening to the end. That night, there was a knock on the door. Slow, hesitant. I knew the rhythm instantly. I opened it just enough to see his face tired, pale, the edges of panic creeping into his expression. Camille, please, he said, hands half raised like he was afraid I'd vanish if he moved too fast. Just talk to me. You're trespassing again, I said quietly. He exhaled sharply. I'm not here to fight. I need you to tell me how to fix this. You can't fix something you broke on purpose. Don't do that, he said. Don't act like I meant to hurt you. I leaned against the doorframe. Intent doesn't change outcome. He ran a hand through his hair. You always have to win, don't you? This isn't about winning, I said. It's about ending. He looked at me like he didn't understand the difference. I can't believe you'd let them destroy me like this. I met his eyes evenly. I didn't destroy you, Dylan. I just stopped protecting you. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. There was nothing left to say, and deep down, he knew it. I nodded toward the street. You should go. You don't live here anymore. He hesitated a second longer before stepping back. You'll regret this, he said quietly. I already regretted you, I said, and closed the door. The lock clicked. The sound was soft but absolute. Afterward, I went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water, and stood there under the dim light. My reflection in the window didn't look like a woman scorned. It looked like a woman finished. The next morning, the local paper published a follow-up. Turner resigns amid allegations. Company sources confirm investigation closed. The headline didn't make me smile, but it did make me breathe easier. There's something deeply satisfying about watching truth do its job without you having to say a word. I folded the paper neatly and slid it into a drawer with the others, the prenup copy, the legal letters, the final settlement draft. Proof that sometimes silence is the most articulate revenge there is. When I walked out to my car, the world was bright and ordinary again. A few birds on the power line, a kid riding his bike to school, someone mowing a lawn down the street. I started the engine, rolled down the window, and let the cool air hit my face. It didn't smell like closure. It smelled like clarity. And clarity, I'd learned, was better than love. The courthouse smelled faintly of floor polish and burnt coffee, like every government building in America. I arrived early, carrying nothing but a folder and a steady pulse. No dramatics, no tears. Just the quiet efficiency of a woman who had already processed every emotion months ago. Jonas was waiting by the bench outside the courtroom, sleeves rolled, coffee in hand. "You look calm," he said. "I've practiced," I replied. He smirked. "You know, most people don't handle divorce like a business negotiation." I adjusted my blazer. "That's because most people still confuse love with liability." He laughed under his breath, then gestured toward the courtroom doors. "Ready?" "More than he is," I said. Inside, the room was nearly empty except for a clerk, a court reporter, and the judge, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and no patience for nonsense. Dylan was already seated at the other table, his lawyer whispering something in his ear. He didn't look up when I walked in. Jonas handed me a pen and slid the final draft across the table. "It's all there," he said quietly. "We pushed through the 70-30. You keep the house, both accounts, and full control of the investments. He gets his car, his debt, and his dignity if that still exists." I nodded. "Perfect." The judge entered. Everyone rose. The gavel's light tap echoed across the room. "We're here for the Turner divorce proceedings," she said. "Are both parties present and consenting?" Dylan cleared his throat. "Yes, Your Honor." I matched his tone. "Yes." The judge looked between us, then down at the paperwork. "Seems everything's been filed correctly. No disputes?" Dylan's lawyer hesitated, whispering something again. Dylan shook his head. "No disputes." The judge signed her name with brisk precision. "Then it's done. Divorce granted." Just like that, 5 years of marriage dissolved into ink and silence. The judge looked up at me. "Mrs. Turner." "Excuse me, Miss Turner. Do you wish to restore your maiden name?" I smiled faintly. "Yes, Your Honor, Miss Camille Rhodes." The gavel tapped again. So ordered. It was over in under 15 minutes. No theatrics, no grand speeches. Just paperwork and closure, 2 things I'd always been good at managing. Dylan finally looked at me then. His eyes were tired, but there was something else: confusion, maybe even disbelief. "You're really okay with this?" he asked, voice low, after the judge left. I turned to face him fully for the first time in weeks. "You keep asking that like I need your permission to be fine." He rubbed his temples. "We could have fixed it, Camille. If you'd just stayed quiet, pretended nothing happened?" I asked, cutting him off. "You don't fix betrayal, Dylan. You replace it with self-respect." Jonas started packing up the files. Dylan lingered a second longer, as if expecting me to soften. I didn't. He finally said, "You'll regret this someday." I looked at him steadily. "That's the thing about dignity, it doesn't expire." Jonas held the door for me as we left the courtroom. Once outside, the air felt lighter, almost too crisp. He handed me a copy of the final decree. "You're officially free," he said. I exhaled. Free and solvent. 2 words every woman should learn to love. Jonas laughed. "You know, you'd make a great lawyer." "I prefer being the client who wins," I said. We shook hands, and he headed off toward the elevator. I walked out into the sunlight, the courthouse steps gleaming under a pale Portland sky. At the bottom of the stairs, I stopped and looked up. Not at the building, but at the sky open, gray, infinite. For years, I'd thought freedom came with risk. Turns out, it just comes with clarity. My phone buzzed a text from Paige. "He's trending on local Reddit. They're calling him the blueprint guy who blew up his own life." I laughed out loud, a genuine laugh, the kind that starts small and grows until you realize it's been months since you've heard your own joy. I texted back, "Justice through architecture." Then I got in my car, drove home, and opened the front door to a house that finally felt like mine. I went straight to the living room, pulled open the drawer where I'd kept all the documents, photos, reports, copies of the prenup, and took them out. I placed them in a large envelope marked Archive and sealed it shut. I didn't burn them. I didn't tear them up. Some truths deserve to exist quietly, just in case the world forgets what they cost. Then I poured a glass of wine, kicked off my heels, and sat on the couch. The TV flickered with some meaningless sitcom laughter in the background, but I barely heard it. Across the room, the late afternoon light spilled through the blinds, warm and steady. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It just felt honest. I picked up my phone, scrolled to his contact, and hovered over delete. After a moment, I pressed it. The name disappeared. Outside, rain began to fall soft, rhythmic, cleansing. I leaned back against the couch, closed my eyes, and let the sound of it fill the room. Divorce didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the most practical form of self-respect I'd ever signed for. The morning sun slid through the blinds, quiet and golden. The house was still. I poured myself a cup of coffee and stood at the window, watching steam curl into the light. There was no rush anymore. No anxious glances at the clock. No waiting for a door to open or close. Just me, a warm mug, and the hum of a world that finally made sense again. A soft knock on the door broke the silence. I hesitated for half a second, then opened it. A courier stood outside, holding a manila envelope. "Delivery for Miss Rhodes," he said. I signed for it, thanked him, and shut the door. The envelope was from Jonas. Inside was the finalized property transfer, everything officially mine. Beneath it, a short, handwritten note. "Camille, sometimes peace isn't a place. It's a decision you stop negotiating. Jay." I smiled. Jonas always knew how to summarize a life in one line. Setting the papers aside, I walked to the living room and looked around. Every object had a story, some painful, some earned. The bookshelf he once mocked for being too sentimental now held my own legal folders and a framed photo of me and Paige at a trailhead in Hood River. The house, once filled with echoes of his voice, now breathed differently, calmer, cleaner, more honest. My phone buzzed on the counter. "Unknown number," I answered. "Camille?" It was his voice. Older somehow, hesitant. "Yes, it's me. I wanted to apologize. For everything. I didn't say anything. Silence has weight, and sometimes it's better to let people feel it." He continued, his tone cracked and uncertain. "I lost everything. The job, the apartment, even my parents stopped talking to me. I don't know where I went wrong." "You went wrong when you mistook my kindness for permission," I said quietly. He exhaled sharply. "I'm not asking for pity. God, Camille, I don't even know who I am anymore." I took a deep breath. "Then you're finally where I was when you said you needed space." He didn't respond for a long time. Finally, he whispered, "You sound different." "I am," I said. "Different is what survival looks like." There was a pause, a long, hollow one. "I hope you're happy," he said finally. "I am," I replied, "because you taught me exactly what happiness isn't." The line went quiet, then disconnected. I stood there for a moment, phone still in my hand. No shaking, no tears, no rush of vindication. Just a stillness that felt earned. Outside, the neighborhood buzzed with life kids on bikes, a dog barking, a delivery truck idling down the street. I grabbed my keys and stepped out into the day. Downtown Portland was bright with late spring sunlight. The streets smelled like rain that hadn't fallen yet. I walked into a small cafe I'd never noticed before, the kind that plays soft jazz and serves coffee with real cream instead of packets. The barista smiled. "What can I get you?" "Something new," I said. He grinned. "That's our best blend." I took my drink to a corner table by the window. Outside, people moved with purpose, carrying laptops, holding hands, rushing somewhere. I used to be one of them, always hurrying toward a future that depended on someone else's approval. Now I was just present. Entirely, quietly present. I pulled out my phone and opened the Notes app. At the top of the page, I typed, "My husband said, 'Don't call me. I need space.'" So I gave him space, permanent, legal, and beautifully silent. Then, just beneath it, "Freedom isn't loud. It's the sound of your own name when you finally say it without fear." I saved it and closed my phone. The cafe door chimed as new customers came in. Somewhere behind me, someone laughed, a clear, easy sound that reminded me what healing actually felt like. When I left, the sky had turned the color of pale gold. I drove home with the windows down, music low, air warm on my skin. The kind of drive that doesn't lead anywhere in particular, just forward. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed a small envelope taped to the front door. No address, just my name in handwriting I recognized. I took it inside, opened it carefully, and found a check for $2,000, Dylan's final payment per the divorce settlement. On the memo line, for closure. I almost laughed. Closure, I thought, had been free all along. I placed the check on the counter, poured myself a glass of wine, and stepped onto the back porch. The sun was sinking behind the trees, scattering gold across the fence line. The air smelled of cedar and rain. For years I'd thought revenge meant getting even, but standing there in the quiet, I finally understood it meant getting out. Out of the noise, out of the waiting, out of the life that kept shrinking to make room for someone else's ego. I raised my glass slightly, not in celebration, but in acknowledgement to endings that arrive on time, and beginnings that don't need permission. The wind moved gently through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a train horn echoed once, then faded. I took a slow sip, leaned back against the railing, and let the silence stay. It didn't feel empty. It felt earned. If you've ever lived through cheating stories, if you've ever rebuilt yourself after husband betrayal, or if you've ever found strength in quiet revenge stories, then you already understand what this was really about: freedom that doesn't ask for permission. Thank you for watching and staying with me through this story. If this hit you somewhere real, subscribe now for more true-to-life cheating stories, revenge stories, and tales of quiet empowerment. Drop a comment below. I read every single one. Tell me, what would you have done if your husband said he needed space?